This is Alice Formica of eOrganic, and I'd like to welcome you all to today's webinar on biocontrol options in vegetable production by J.C. Chang and Gun Gill of Clemson University. This is the first in a series of 4 webinars on biocontrol this February and early March. So today, I'm very pleased to introduce our presenters. J.C. Chang is a professor and extension specialist, and Gun Gill is a postdoctoral research associate at Clemson University in South Carolina. They're both part of a NIFA OREI-funded research and extension team focusing on developing and implementing effective biological control programs for major pests in organic tomato and squash production. So without any further ado, I'm going to pass over the controls to our first presenter, Gun Gill.
Yes, thank you, Alice, for the introduction. Can you hear me loud and clear?
I can.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. JC and I will be presenting biological control options in vegetable production systems. I'm sure many of you are already familiar with biological control, but for those of you who are new at organic crop production, biological control is collection of pest management tactics that use natural enemies to reduce the pest populations. These natural enemies could be predators that consume the pest, just like lady beetle consuming aphids in the picture, or these could be parasitoids, which do not consume, but they lay egg within the pest, and their larvae that hatches from that egg eat that pest inside out. Or these natural enemies could also be pathogens like fungi, bacteria, virus, or in this picture, nematodes. But regardless of which natural enemy we use, the ultimate goal is to minimize the use of pesticides. And I would like to say that this webinar is more of an introduction webinar, and we'll go through some of the examples of biocontrol agents and some biopesticides. But if you would like to have specific knowledge about management of virus in vegetables, or white flies in squash, or spider mites in tomato, please join us on February 10th, 24th, and March 1st. And before I go into meat of my talk, I would like to spend a few seconds on the importance of this most valuable tool called HandLens. If you have it, that's great. If you don't, I would suggest please get it. It's about $10, and it magnifies the view by 10x. Because most of the pests we deal with in vegetable systems are very tiny. This lens will help you to correctly identify the pest, and based on that, you can choose the right biological control agent. So it's very important to have this tiny lens in your pocket. So the first question is that, can we buy and release these biological control agents? It's often called augmentation biological control, where we can release a lot, like a mass number of commercially reared biological control agents. Many companies around the US supply these biocontrol agents in the bottles that you can use to sprinkle around in your crop, or you can use these packets that you can see in the picture, and you can hang this packet in your crop, and the biocontrol agents will disperse on their own. However, not all the biological control agents are suitable to release in the open fields, as many of them can fly or are very mobile, and they can easily run away. But there are situations when releasing these biocontrol agents makes sense. First situation would be when we are using the biocontrol agents which are less mobile, such as predatory mites or immature insects like larvae of lacewings. We will be going through these biological control agents in the next slides as well. Or your crop is in enclosed environment, such as high tunnels, hoop house, greenhouse or isolated field, which can enclose these, biological control agents, and they would be limited inside and not run away. Or if you would like to use these agents as a preventive measure, if you have a pest that you're expecting on your crop. But we cannot expect these biocontrol agents to last forever because they highly depend on the pest, right? Once the pest population goes down in the crop, so does their population. So in today's talk, I will be showing you some examples of predators, then parasitoids, and then biological pesticides that are commercially available through many companies. Here, what I'm showing you is lady beetle, and I'm sure many of you have already seen this beetle in your farms, in the field. However, what is not common is this larvae, which you can see in the video. It's the immature stage of this beetle. And I would like to say that both larvae and adult of these beetles are very important biological control agents, and they provide efficient control of many aphid species. Second, we have a spider mite destroyer beetle. Just like the lady beetle that I showed you in the last slide, both adult and larvae of this beetle provide control to spider mite species. Their range of eating spider mites is pretty broad. They control many species of spider mites, and they are also commercially available. Then we have green lacewing. This particular bug is very interesting because the adult that you see in the picture on the right down corner, they do not provide any control. Instead, they feed on nectars, pollen, or honeydew. But their larvae, which you are seeing in the video, do the job. So what they do is they use these sickle-shaped mouth parts to hold the pest, and then they suck out the content out of the pest's body. They provide control against aphids and psyllids. On the picture on the left corner, where you are seeing these fancy needles and pearl-shaped eggs, these are the eggs of these lacewings, which you can find on underside of leaves in the vegetables. And this green lacewing is also available commercially. Next, just like the green lacewing, minute pirate bug is another beneficial insect which also suck out the content of this pest. They use this beak-shaped mouth part called stylet, and they insert that in the body of pest and suck out all the content and eventually kill them. They control thrips, spider mites, aphids, and small caterpillars. Predatory mites are another important biological control agents. They are of particular importance because they are less mobile. They do not run away from the fields like the others can, the flying bugs can. These feed just like minute pirate bug and grease lace wing. They suck out the content of pest body. They control spider mites, white flies, and thrips. And here are some of the examples of commercially available predatory mites. On the right, there is Amlesius savarski nucellus species. And they are also available in a wide range of species, and they are very important biological control agents. Now I'm gonna switch gears and I'm gonna talk about parasitoids, which do not consume or suck out the content of the body of the pest, but instead the adult of these biological agents, they lay egg within the pest's body. So what you will see in this video is this adult female wasp that is looking for this host, in this case, aphids. And once it selects that host, it uses that ovipositor to deposit the egg within the body of aphids. And once the egg hatch within its body, it eat whole, body inside out, and eventually result in the death of host. Some of the examples of these parasitoid wasps are on the right, Rhatmoceras species that provide control against whiteflies. And then we have Aphidius and Aphilinus species that control aphids. But really, how practical is to release these biological control agents? Well, like I mentioned, some of them are highly mobile. They can fly away, they can run away in the open fields. And also, if you see this graph on the right, what happens is that these predators generation always lag behind the pest generations, meaning that they take some time to build up and then control the pest. But what if we need a quick action, right? So something which is also suitable to apply in the fields and also do a bit quicker job are biopesticides. Biopesticides, we can also call them the gateway drug to biological control. They are basically pathogens which are mass produced and formulated in a way that we can use them just like chemical pesticides. They are based on fungus, bacteria, virus, nematodes, and we will go through each of them in next few slides. So for the biopesticides, which are based on fungus, they work as a contact pesticide, meaning once the insect pest gets in contact with that fungus, those spores of fungus will penetrate through the insect's cuticle, and they will start growing within the body of that insect pest and eventually result in killing it. Some of the fungal species also produce toxins that increase the killing speed. So what we are looking at on the picture on the right is that fuzzy looking insect. It's been killed by the fungal biopesticide. But for using these biopesticides, there are some best practices. For example, to use them, it's very important to cover the plants thoroughly with these biopesticides, because like I mentioned, they work as contact pesticides. They also favor humid conditions. So in dry conditions, they won't do as good of a job as they do in the humid conditions. And third is that because they are also live organisms, they are fungal spores. If they are exposed to prolonged sunlight, that can result in inactivation of those spores. So whenever we apply these biopesticides, we use we either do it on the cloudy days, or we do in like early morning, or we do it in the evenings. Here are some of the examples of commercially available biopesticides. Those are fungi based. For example, Beauveria bassiana is very commonly known biopesticide. It controls whiteflies, thrips. There are other species like Isaria species, Metarrhizum species. They also control whiteflies, but Isaria species also work for spider mites. And it's also important to know that the last one, Nosema species, only control grasshoppers. So what I mean to say is that when we apply these biopesticide, it's important to recognize which pest we are applying to, because each fungi has their specific targets. Next one, we have biopesticides based on bacteria. So in bacteria and virus cases, what is important is to have this, biopesticide ingested in the pest. So what I mean by that is that the chewing mouth part pest, just like these caterpillars which eat the leaves, with that, these bacterial biopesticides will go in their gut. And once inside the body of insects, they will cause mid-gut paralysis and eventually result in the death of caterpillars. So in the picture on our right side, the light greenish color caterpillar is the healthy alive caterpillar, and the black and brownish color caterpillar is the one which has been killed by this bacterial fungicide. And same as bacteria, virus biopesticides also work in a way that they has to be ingested by those insects. And once they are in the gut of insect, they also attack it and then eventually result in the death of the insect. But the interesting part about these, viral infected larvae is that once they get infected, they climb higher. They climb as high as they can in the plant canopy, and once they die there, they will appear like this in the picture, like hanging on the top. From there, the virus spreads from top to bottom and infect the other insects. And here I'm showing you the list of some biopesticides that are based on bacteria and viruses, and these are also commercially available. The most commonly known ones are Bacillus thuringiensis. Their target is caterpillars, and the nuclear polyhedrosis virus is also work against the caterpillars. Last one is the biopesticides. Those are based on nematodes. Nematodes are nothing but these small round worms that can kill the insects, but they are harmless to other organisms. Nematodes are mainly present in the soils, so they control the pests which are live in the soil, just like fungal gnats or weevils or beetles. Once they enter the body of insect, these nematode has this special relationship with the bacteria. So what they do is they release the bacteria within the insect and eventually result in killing that insect. Here we have some examples of biopesticides that are based off nematodes. And like I mentioned, they work for fly maggots, fungus gnats, shore flies, onion maggots, or they also work for beetles and flea beetle weevils, and slugs and snails. So some tips for using these biopesticides is first, like I showed you in last few tables, that we have to choose these biopesticides based on the target pests, because they have very specific targets that they control. They work better against the younger insects, and when the populations are smaller, their efficiency reduces as the insects, the population grows bigger. And also, when we plan to apply these biopesticides, it's very important to plan it accordingly so that your disease control program doesn't interfere with the biopesticides. Because like I mentioned, what happens is these fungicides, they kill the fungus or these live organisms. And biopesticides are also those live organisms. So they can easily interfere with these biopesticides if we apply them simultaneously. And also, we need to store and apply these biopesticides as directed, because, like I mentioned, they are very they can be influenced by environmental conditions such as humidity or sunlight and all that. So until now, what I showed you are, the commercially available biocontrol agents that we can buy and that we can release on our crops. But what if we do not want to add in our cost, but we just want to attract natural enemies and have them around in our crops to control the pest? That way of attracting the natural enemies and keeping it is called conservation. And here I'm gonna hand over the podium to JC, who will be showing you that how can we conserve and keep the natural enemies around. Thank you.
Hey, everybody. Thank you all for joining us for the webinar. And for the next few minutes, what I want to do is to talk about another approach with biological control, which is called the conservation biocontrol. And for this particular approach to biocontrol, the whole goal, as Gun mentioned, was to really attract the biocontrol agents or even build up their population within your vegetable crops. So there are several different approaches that you can definitely do that. But really, the whole idea of a conservation biocontrol really is built around the fact that, the pest population in the field are often controlled or suppressed by the natural enemy population. And so anything you can do to booster the population of natural enemies is always better for you than not having to do that. So in some cases, natural enemies actually have their favorite because after all, they are basically living organisms. And over the years, after many research, folks are starting to figure out, what are the farms that are they are favored by natural enemies. There are several characteristics, and the most important characteristic is how diverse your plant species are. The more natural vegetation you have surrounding the farm, the better you are. You're probably going to have more natural enemies. And if you have a farm that have a more diverse plant species, that doesn't mean you grow more species of crop, but also you incorporate a lot of plant species that are non-crop, but provide resources to the natural enemies. Then your farm would be favored by natural enemies. You're probably going to have a lot more of them. And also farm with minimal agrochemical inputs. By agrochemicals, I mean, could be fertilizer, it could be insecticide, and it could be fungicide. And all these agrochemical just would interfere with the activity of the natural enemy, and therefore you're not going to end up having a lot of them. And also farms with soil that's high in organic matters, or those soil that have plenty of microbes and plenty of biological activities, usually those farms are also favored by natural enemies. Now, a lot of time when we're thinking about farm, this is sort of what we're looking at. It's sort of like, okay, we grow the plants on the plastic, and then we get rid of every bit of weed. Now, in some way, that is good. In some way, that will reduce a lot of pests and disease problem. But in a farm that is very biologically desert, you basically have your crop and a few other plants, and that's it. And farms like this are not conducive to attracting or keeping your natural enemies because there's really no resources for the natural enemies to go to. Instead, what you could do by improving the plant diversity in your farm is to grow companion plants. Companion plants can work in a lot of different ways, depending on what kind of plants you use and what kind of natural enemies you are focusing on. And some of the companion plants, you could use them to repel pests. And some of the companion plants, you could actually grow them to attract natural enemies. And some by providing them with shelters of refuge. And some of the plants would actually provide food to the natural enemies, such as pollen and nectar. And this picture is showing that the Aureus insidiosus, or the minute pirate bugs, feeding on pollens. And by feeding on pollens, the minute pirate bugs can actually build up their population, and then they can spread out. and try to control the pest population on your crop. So companion planting, there are a lot of different kinds, and it all depends on what kind of function you want them to serve. And a lot of time you can actually incorporate all these companion plants in your farm. You can grow them along the outer edge or the perimeters of the farm. For example, these sweet asylums that were grown around the strawberry field, or you can incorporate them as intercropping by planting patches of them inside. And the idea between the one growing along the perimeters and the intercropping is that the one growing on the perimeters, they're further away from the center of the cash crop or the main crop, and you ended up not having as much biocontrol agents inside the center of the crop. So you're just intercropping them and growing the sweet asylum among the crop, and so that the biocontrol agents can jump from one patch to the other and help them to spread out a little bit more. There are a lot of different ways you can actually incorporate companion plants in vegetable production. And we are still sort of in the infancy, I feel like, that to try to figure out exactly what are some of the best plants that we can grow as companion plants. But there's some information out there that you can use, basically. And here are some of the plant species that were commonly grown to attract natural enemies. Things like sunflowers, goldenrod, sweet fennel, dill, sweet alyssum, fava beans, buckwheat, and even oriental or milkweed further south. And all of these companion plants, they basically provide certain resources to the natural enemies that they attract. For example, sweet alyssum are very, very attractive to hoverflies. And some of the vegetable farms that I work with down here in South Carolina, when they grow sweet alyssum, they can attract so much hoverflies that there are not very much aphids left in the field. So it can be very effective when you're doing this. And sure, when you're growing companion plants, you're basically given some of these non-crop plants some of the growing space, and you may have to reduce your growing area. But in organic farming, where we don't have a lot of pest management tool, just giving up a little bit of space and in return for greater biological control efficacy is definitely worth it. So despite of what we're doing with biocontrol, sometimes we're still going to have an outbreak. For example, if you grow kale and you ended up having bunches of diamondback moths suddenly showed up, or you're growing some other crops and then thrips coming in from another farm nearby that you have absolutely no control over. So suddenly you're going to have an outbreak, and you probably ended up needing to spray pesticide in some way. And one thing I need to mention when we're spraying insecticide is that even an organic insecticide or OMRI listed insecticide can kill a biocontrol agent when they're in direct contact with that biocontrol agent. So I don't want everybody to keep the misconception that simply because it's an organic insecticide or OMRI insecticide, it is absolutely safe for everything. In some cases, it may not. I'll show you some example in a little bit. But anyway, for you, if you want to think about controlling pests using both biological and chemical control tools, you really need to think about how you can best combine them. And if you are doing a biocontrol program, it's always my recommendation that if you could avoid using any insecticide or miticide, avoid using them. If you can't avoid using them, really think about how compatible they are to biocontrol agents. So by compatibility, I mean that how much effect this chemical is going to have on the biocontrol agents. Is it going to kill them? Is it going to reduce their foraging behavior? Is it going to reduce their efficacy? Things like that. As far as whether it's going to kill them or not, and when you can use them, things like that, we actually have pretty decent tools out there. So there are two tools, if you don't already know it, that I want to introduce to you, the so-called side effect manual. And Biopest and Cobert, which are two of the companies that produce a lot of biocontrol agents for mass release, they actually maintain pretty decent site control tools, manual, that you can actually access whenever you want to. And this is one of the one that is by Biopest, one of the bigger company. So typically what is going to happen is that in all these side effect manual, they're going to ask you what kind of pesticide you want to use. And then they're going to ask you to select the beneficial organism that you want to work with. And so, and the toxicity, and all these toxicity are basically whether it's going to kill the natural enemies or not. It doesn't tell you anything about whether it's going to reduce their reproduction, and it doesn't tell you anything about whether it's going to reduce the number of pests that they actually kill. It doesn't tell you anything about that. So there's a little bit of shortcoming on that. But at the very least, it will tell you what kind of mortality you can expect if you spray on the natural enemies. And it will also tell you exactly how long you have to wait before you can release your natural enemies again. So anyway, the toxicity of natural enemies are classified by numbers from 1 to 4. 1 is non-toxic, which means it causes less than 25% mortality. And 4 is highly toxic, meaning that if you spray that thing on your natural enemy population, you can expect at least 75% of them die. And most of these data are collected from laboratory study. But, you know, and a lot of people are going to ask, okay, well, how is it applicable to the field? Maybe not very applicable. Well, I should say that is debatable. But I think at least a lab study will give you a pretty good estimate as far as what you should use and what you shouldn't. All right, this is the side effect manual by Colbert. Same thing, you can select the pesticide, and then you can select your biocontrol agents. And here I give you an example, basically looking at the compatibility of azadirachtin, spinosad, and pyrethrin against Ambrosia swarsky. Ambrosia swarsky, as Gun has mentioned earlier, is a very important predatory mites used to control thrips and whiteflies in greenhouse production. And you can release them in the field as well. So anyway, so we're looking at pyrethrin, azadirachtin, and spinosad and see how compatible they are. And the side effect manual basically saying that, well, azadirachtin, pretty compatible. The number is 1 and 2 when you spray azadirachtin on a population of Ambrosia swarsky. And so, you know, azadirachtin is probably good to go with Ambrosia swarsky. Pyrethrin, there's no data. So that basically point to you that, yeah, these side effect manuals are pretty useful, but sometimes the data is not always there because nobody has done those studies yet. And we are working on slowly filling in those gaps and making these two more and more effective, more and more useful. Spinosad, or conserve or entrust, that particular product, when you spray them, is highly toxic to Ambrosia swarsky. As you can see, number is 4 to both adult and egg. But if you drench spinosad, then the efficacy, they become very, very compatible. So it kind of tells you that the compatibility not just depends on the active ingredient, but also depends on how you actually apply them. And if you are drenching spinosad, and you also get you don't have to wait for any time to release the swarsky again, because the persistence of the active ingredient on the leaf tissue is 0 week. So you can release anytime soon. So all these side effect manuals are very, very useful. If you do not use this resource yet, I would encourage you to do so. Just go ahead, check it out and see, play with it a little bit. I mean, everybody can access it. It's free. Play with it and see whether it's going to help you with your pest management program or not. So we're pretty close to the end. So what I'll do is do a little bit of summarizing with take home for you. And so the first thing I would say is start small. All right. So what I mean is that if you're not already doing biological control, start small. Get a little bit of success and build up your program a little bit at a time. You don't want to go whole hog into it and then ended up failing, and then you say, oh, this is just, you know, not working. Give it some time. It's a lot of trial and error. And if you're going to start and you haven't started yet, I would say start with biopesticide. As Glenn mentioned, biopesticide is almost like it's almost like a gateway drug for me. Get a little taste of it, you're happy with it, then you can expand to something else. All right. So, and the second thing is to improve plant diversity on your farm. That would really help with attracting, retaining, and sometimes even building your natural enemy population. And if you are thinking about releasing biocontrol agents, I always say, try to do that as a preventive measure. You probably want to release them even before infestation, just to make sure that the natural enemies is there, and when the pests showed up, they are ready to take care of the pests for you. And then the fourth thing is make sure your agrochemical do not interfere with your biocontrol agents if you are going to use agrochemical at all. And lastly, make sure you talk to somebody. Talk to your peer, talk to your local extension agents, talk to me. You have my email address. You can find it pretty easy. JC Chong, Clemson. The first one to come out. There's no other JC Chong. So call me, call your county agents, call anybody that you can talk to, and get their experience, get their take on what is going on. All right, so before I stop, I want to invite you guys again to attend some of our upcoming eOrganic webinars on vectors, on biocontrol whiteflies in squash, biocontrols, spider mites in tomatoes. Again, as Gun said, today is more or less an introduction to biological control. If you want to get more deeper, more detailed information about controlling whiteflies and spider mites, make sure you join us. All right, that's it. We got. And Alex?
All right, thank you. Yeah, that was a great presentation. I really liked those incredible photos and videos that Gun showed there. I don't know if I'll be able to sleep tonight after that, but yeah, they were really excellent videos. So we're going to start our question and answer period. And so if you have a question, I know people have already started asking questions, please type them into the Q&A box on your screen, and we'll be reading the questions out loud until we run out of time. We've got about half an hour, so even longer if we need to go to, because you ended pretty quickly. And so if you don't see the Q&A box, just hover over the black bar at the bottom of your screen and you should be able to pull that up. And I did put the link to the slide handout in the chat box in case you'd like to download that and take a look at it later. And we're also recording this. And so the recording will be available on the eOrganic YouTube channel within about a week. We'll also be sending you a follow-up survey by email later today. And we'd really appreciate it if you could fill that out. And you're definitely invited to attend all the webinars in this series where we'll go into greater detail with certain biological control agents. So moving on, let's start with some of the questions here. I just have to open up my Q&A box, and there's been people putting them in the chat as well. So if you could put them in the Q&A, then I can just look in one place, but either way is fine. So okay, first question we had was, do green lacewings eat leaf rollers? And if so, how effective can they be in a biological control program?
Oh, that's a good question. Now, actually, the green lacewing is a very, very broad spectrum natural enemies. It's a very generalist. So it would just about eat anything it can get that little sickle shaped mouth part on. And in the South, we kind of call them the alligator of the leaves. And anything they come across they can eat, they will try to eat it. So yes, they will probably feed on the leaf roller, especially when the leaf rollers are still kind of small, just coming out from the eggs. But the problem is with the leaf rollers is that as soon as they start making that case, making that web, make them very difficult to access. So the green lacewing might not be able to get to them after they make their nest. So you want to make sure that the green lacewings are going to be there often, and probably before the leaf roller getting way too problematic.
Okay. Is it possible to raise biological control using growing degree days and phrenology and have them ready with little or no lag time? I know in the last webinar in the series are going to be talking about raising some biological control agents, but what are your thoughts on that question?
Well, that's a good question. I never really thought about it to use a degree day, and often we use degree day to try to forecast when the pests are actually going to emerge. I'm not familiar with trying to predict when the biocontrol is going to show up, but I feel like if you always provide them with the resources they want, either through companion planting or through a banker plant of some kind, then they will be there often. For those of you that are not familiar with the concept of banker plant, it is basically to grow a kind of non-crop host, a plant, and then you infest it or you make them provide certain resources. You can infest them with a insect species that is not going to get on your crop. Of course, you don't want to grow more pests, aphids ended up ending in your crop at all. But you can grow some of the aphid species that doesn't get onto your crop, and then you can build up a parasitoid population or a predator population on it. And another kind of banker plant is to provide them with some resources, which is one of the example I can think of is minute pirate bugs. You can grow ornamental peppers, which produce a lot of pollen, and then you can build up a minute pirate bug population that will spread out into some other locations. In fact, a lot of farms that I work with, most of them are hoop houses or greenhouses. What they'll do is they will actually build up their own insectary using banker plant. And so they can basically take that banker plant into the growing area and let the bugs come up.
Okay. Did you suggest using biopesticides first? Because once you are able to establish more biodiversity in your growing area, then you can rely on them less?
Right, I would agree with that. And
Okay.
that's one of the reasons why I think could be a good gateway drug.
Okay.
Just kind of get it started, get yourself started, keep the population down, and then later on you can come in and release your biocontrol agents or build up your population out in the field.
Okay. When you're using a viral biopesticide, does the larvae that are infected with the virus cause problems when birds eat them?
That's a very good question. Now, um, the answer to that is no, because all the viruses that we have available commercially, and in fact, most of the viruses out there targeting insects only target insects. And the commercial product containing virus are mostly against caterpillars and nothing else. And just like, I hate to say it, but just like coronavirus, it doesn't really infect a lot of other things. It's pretty deadly for human, but it doesn't infect a lot of other things like a bird. So for most of the polyhydrovirus, um, there's no fear of it ever infecting birds or cats or dogs or even human for that matter. So it's super safe.
Okay, here's someone who's wondering whether there are specific sprayer types or calibrations for biocontrol applications and where might one find that information?
So the question is about sprayer type or calibration, things like that for biopesticide. For biopesticide, no, there's not really any sort of requirement as far as sprayer droplet size or even spray volume. That's pretty user friendly. As long as you follow the instruction on the label, you should be doing very well. And one thing I do want to mention is to use nematode. When you are using nematode and you apply them with your sprayer, you need to make sure that you take out the screen on the inside of the nozzle because nematode is usually a little bit bigger than the fungi spores or bacteria spores, which can pass through that screen pretty easy. But for nematode, a lot of times they actually got tangled up on that screen and ended up not coming out. So
Hmm.
if you're using nematode at all and you're going to spray them, then you want to make sure the screen is taken out.
Okay, yeah, that sounds like an important point. Okay, Gun mentioned the 10x hand lens. Is there a good place to buy one, a good website? Because this person's only seeing them for about $40. Is there a particular type you recommend, or is that something that you can get at a particular type of store?
No, you can buy that at a lot of places, and I often buy a bunch of it just to give out at my extension talk. So come to one of those, maybe I'll give it to you.
Have to come to South
But
Carolina.
yeah, try all the way down here. But you know what? You could actually get it pretty cheap for $10, no problem. I could find a few sources and send it to you, Alex, and you can post it
Okay,
up.
yeah, and Yeah, Jenna, if you could send me an email, then that'll remind me to make sure I get you that
Mhm.
information, or we could even post that on the
Right,
webinar page along with the recording.
right. In
So
fact,
yeah.
you don't even need anything. You don't even really need anything fancy. Really, there are a lot of plastic ones that is really cheap and
Mm-hmm.
still do pretty decent job. In fact, a lot of time, if you go to a trade show and whatnot, if there's a company that's selling stuff, you can always just get one for free. In fact, Gun just showed me something on Amazon. For like two pieces for like less than $10.
Oh, okay, great. Okay, yeah, so maybe check there. Okay, so we have a question here about the fungi Nosema for caterpillars. Is that the same one that causes disease in honeybees?
So the Nosema, that particular one, Nosema locustae, that one, it is for locusts or for grasshoppers,
Huh.
and it's a complete different species from the one that is causing Nosema diseases in
Okay.
honeybird. So that's something that you don't have to worry about.
Okay, great. Okay, so this is the same question about birds. You answered that one. Let's see. What is your biological recommendation for leafhoppers and Colorado potato beetles as far as insects and biopesticides?
Oh boy, gotta stump me on that one, huh? Unfortunately, there's not a whole lot of options for leafhoppers other than using Bovea bassiana. But Bovea bassiana only are able to knock down the population that you already have. The one problem with a lot of biopesticide is that the residual is very short, so they will kill the insects you have, and not the one that come afterward. So you might have to use things like Bovea bassiana to control your leafhoppers pretty regularly. And for Colorado potato beetles, there is a subspecies of BT, Bacillus thuringiensis. There's a subspecies called Tenebrioni that is specific for beetle larvae. It would not kill caterpillars, it will not kill fly, it will only kill beetle larvae. I'm trying to think what is the trade name. There's at least one product out there for that.
Okay, yeah. If you find it,
Bacillus
you can
thuringiensis
type it into the
tenebrioni.
chat there. Okay. Let's see. Meanwhile, let's see. Oh, yeah, this is a good question. Um, whether there are any legal requirements similar to pesticide registration before biocontrols can be ordered and used in different states.
Okay. Usually, biocontrol agents are usually is outside of the review process by the EPA. So there's not really a registration process for EPA, but some of the companies that actually produce biopesticide, they will go through the EPA registration process. And if they go through that process, they have to go through the same process for state registration as well. So biopesticides sometimes may not be available on all the states, depending on what the states, how stringent their review process is. But as far as the biocontrol agents like predatory mites or uh, uh, minute bugs or anything that you can buy and release, those typically do not have a whole lot of restrictions as far as when you buy them, where you release them, things like that.
Okay, we have a question about larger scale farms here. So it says diversity works for small scale growers. What about large scale ones? And do you have any data experience about releasing beneficials using drones?
Haha. Well, let me, excuse me. That's my experience is that the biocontrol agents, biological control program seems to be much um, more widely adopted by smaller farms. Maybe because that is easier to do smaller applications and easier to actually grow different plant species in a smaller farm. That's my impression of it. But that doesn't mean that it is not suitable for large commercial, large conventional farm as well. Some of the farm that we have in South Carolina are several hundred acres, and they are pretty religious about growing buckwheat as a companion plant. And many of them are also using cover crops for roadside just to prevent erosion or weed emergence and things like that. So a lot of these planting, depending on what kind of species you got, you can actually incorporate them, use different kind of plant species to actually help you attract different kind of natural enemies. And what's the second question again? Sorry.
Oh, yeah, the first question. Okay, so the first one was about diversity working for small scale growers. What about large scale ones? And the
Right,
second
field
one
work.
was whether you have any data or experience about releasing beneficials using drones.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I do not have any experience or data on releasing using drone, unfortunately, but drone has definitely been looked at as a release project. I even know there's one company that specializes in doing developing drones for biocontrol releases. I do not have any data to suggest one way or the other whether it's effective or not.
Okay. If you're using parasitoids for aphid control but want to get a jump on the season in greenhouses, does applying Grandiva hurt any residual population of Aphidius?
So Grandivo is also a biocontrol. It's also a biopesticide. It's a bacteria-based biopesticide, and from what we are seeing and from what we can find on the database is that they are they are not going to be too harmful to the Aphidius parasitoid at all. So what I was saying is that if you already have a Aphidius population in the greenhouse, the impact on them is going to be minimal. And if you are going to release the Aphidius product into your greenhouse after the application of Grandivo, I believe that you're not going to have any issue at all.
Okay, we have some really helpful comments here from some audience members. David said that BioQuip has hand lenses, very cheap. So thanks for that tip there.
Thanks, David.
Yeah, and then Chris said you can use the zoom on your camera on your phone to look at bugs.
Yep, absolutely. In fact, there are a lot of little adapters for your phone that you can clip onto the camera, and then it will magnify it for you. I have like 3 or 4 of them in my drawer right now, but all of them could actually do a very good job into taking good pictures and like you see the little bugs. And one other good thing about using those kind of camera with macro lens is basically that you can take a picture. You don't know what it is, shoot, text it or email it to one of the extension agents, and they might be able to tell you what it is.
That's a great point there. Thanks for that. Okay, we have a question about whether there's a virus available for leafhopper control.
Unfortunately, I'm not aware of any virus that's commercialized for leafhopper control.
Okay, there are a couple people who want to know the name of the biopesticide for Colorado potato beetle, since they've had trouble hearing or something. So if you wouldn't mind typing that in the chat, that would be really helpful. If you can, yeah, okay, that'd be great.
Right.
Okay, and let's see. Moving on here, we've got some more questions. Do you know if there's a biological control for earwigs?
Never have anybody asked me that question before. As far as I know, no, I'm not aware of any biocontrol options for earwig.
Okay, and do you have a preference for microbial live fungus based organisms versus dead organisms based on toxins and fermentation? Let's see, I can't. Let's see. Do you see that question there? I'm just trying to.
Yeah,
I
believe I understand what this person asking for. So within the biopesticide, most of them are living spores or living nematodes. But there's one very small group that is based on the extract or the metabolite of those bacteria or the fungi. And venerate, which is one of the trade name, is one of those. So venerate is one of those. And the question is, which one is more effective? Is is it the spores or the extract? I don't really have a strong feeling about that, or even have really data to support one way or the other. But I think either one would be fine. The extract probably will give you a little bit more flexibility. Why I'm saying that is because most of the biocontrol agents, when they are leaving spores, they will require specific environmental property to try to environmental property to make them germinate and then take effect and things like that. So if you're using live spore and whatnot, you do need to think about whether the environmental factor is important or not. And for the extract, on the other hand, well, they can be used just like an insecticide for the most part. So they would have a little bit more flexibility in the use.
Okay. Let's see. We have another question about if you could repeat what the biological control agents are for red spider mites.
So there are several different species of biocontrol agents for red spider mite. But for the red spider mites is a kind of basically a very similar to two-spotted spider mite. In fact, most of the time people call two-spotted spider mite red spider mite as well. And one of the most commonly used biocontrol agents for spider mite is Phytoceus persimilis. That's a predatory mite, and the other one is a Neocelis californicus. That's also a predatory mite. And then there's the spider mite destroyer beetle. And as far as biopesticide, most of them are registered for spider mite control, including Bouviella bassiana and also Iceria, and also Chromobacteria or Grandivo.
Okay, so I'd just like to thank Carla for her helpful comment to the earwig questioner here. She said that there's a product called Seduce insect bait based on spinosad, which is OMRI listed, that has earwigs on the label.
Ah, okay.
Okay, thanks. And then, of course, for organic production, it's always very important to check with your organic certifier before applying anything. So I just wanted to mention that as well, since that's always critical.
Yep, that's very, very important.
Yep. Okay, well, it looks like we've reached the end of our Q&A here. So I'd just like to thank everyone for all of these great questions. It was a lively discussion. And I'd like to make sure all of you know about where you can find the other webinars in the series. It's at the first link on your screen here. If you just Google eOrganic webinars, you should be able to find the schedule, and then you can register for all of them. And you'll be able to find this recording in about a week, as I mentioned, on the eOrganic YouTube channel, and we'd be very grateful if you could fill out our follow-up email survey later today. So thank you so much, JC and Gun. That was a great and really informative presentation, and thanks to everyone for joining us.
Yes, thank you everybody for joining us, and I hope to see you all in the future webinar.
Okay.